Good morning, my beauties, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us today for another episode of A Crystal Clear Mind. And today I am blessed to have on my show the beautiful Tanja Walser. Tanja is a health coach and she helps women with their healthy lifestyle. So I'm going to hand it over to Tanja to explain this one a little bit better, because it is much more deep than that. Of course, it's never just as simple as what we start with. There's always more of a story behind it. But I'm going to hand over to Tanja to tell her all about herself. Hiya, Tanja.
Hi, thank you for having me. Exciting to be here.
Lovely to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm a health coach. I trained in functional medicine, which is not that well known in the UK yet, but it's basically we work with lifestyle and we use the pillars that you would probably expect, like nutrition and movement. Stress management is big, sleep, and the one that kind of leans into it is community. A lot of more people than we would think are lonely.
Yeah.
And that has an impact on health and well-being as well. So those are sort of the pillars that we in functional medicine and I as a coach work with. And I primarily work with women over 40. I started off with an interest in menopause for personal reasons and all my friends around me. And that naturally transitioned into an interest from our mid-30s, 40s onward. My interest in female health doesn't stop at 50, 55 when menopause is completed. So it's how do we stay well physically, mentally, emotionally for ideally as long as we live.
Absolutely. It's like a huge question, that one, isn't it? How do we stay as healthy as possible while still enjoying our life? We don't want to be so restricted, because obviously sometimes it can be a bit restrictive, but it's a tough question. Like, how do you do that? And then navigate those time changes that happens to people in general, but obviously to women more because of the hormonal shifts. So it is a very, very good question. And so functional medicine, is there like a difference between that and what we would call like a holistic take on it? Because obviously you've got the holistic style where you take everything in as a whole. So you are looking directly at the mental, the emotional, the physical, the spiritual. And you're looking at all of that when you're dealing with the symptoms of some ailment or another. So you would be looking more at like lifestyle sectors. So as you said, sort of sleep and diet and exercise and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, we look at the whole person as well. I think holistic approaches all have overlaps.
Yeah.
For us, functional medicine, and in the States, it's much better known than here. It always surprises my American health coaching friends that here we're only finding it, I think. So there are doctors. So if you're a doctor, you can add training in functional medicine, and then you use both. So in functional medicine, we kind of stay evidence-based. So we read the same research as your GP would read, and work from there. But then we work with things that you do, your life. That's where you have the biggest impact. It has much more of an impact what you do kind of all day, every day,
Yeah.
than some small snippet. And you said, we don't want restrictions. No, we don't. Really don't. I have this fundamental belief that life is supposed to be joyful and happy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And food is supposed to be nourishing and tasty. I've one of my clients actually recently asked me that and said, would it be okay if I just ate edible food sort of Monday till Friday and had good food Saturday, Sunday? And I said, no, I find that absolutely not acceptable. It really is. You can have nourishing food and healthy at the same time. And, you can make exceptions. Y- We design, we kind of design in health coaching people's lifestyle, but their personal lifestyle. What is important to you? What kind of habits or like family traditions do you have where you're like, oh, but we always have a curry on a Friday. I don't want to let that go. And then we can look at that, is it a really unhealthy curry? Um, do we need to change something around it? Can we improve it? What can we do so the beauty of this tradition as a family stays whilst gradually moving closer to healthy lifestyle? And I think when you do that, you don't fall off the horse, because it fits you. It's like
Yeah,
clothes that
definitely.
fit you. There's because there's not you're not allowed to do this and you have to eat pineapples for the next I don't know how many days. Um, you don't fall off the horse because you design it.
That's a really lovely way of putting it. I like that you design it. I love that. Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, I work with a PT occasionally, and we talk about lifestyle, we talk about diet, and so on. And she is adamant: nothing's off the cards. You got two kids, so if you stop at McDonald's and you're gonna, they're having something and you're hungry, nothing's off the cards. Just know what you're looking for, know what you are trying to avoid. If you do go naughty, go naughty. Just fix it later with balance. And I love that concept because it stops you necessarily wanting all the naughty stuff at once, doesn't it? Because the second we're like kids, aren't we? The second you're told no, it's all you want.
Yeah, and I'm originally from Switzerland and I'm about to go home, and I asked my mum to get me seasonal things that were available about a month ago and now are not. And one of
Lovely.
my clients asked me, and it's not necessarily the healthy food. And my client said, "Do you eat that?" And I said, "Yes." My mum bought me one pack, and I'll enjoy that, and then I'll go back to the normal healthy eating. And I think that's true for movement.
Yeah,
Finding movement that you enjoy, movement that fits into your life, that doesn't constantly fall out of the calendar because it actually never was in the right place. Stress management is big. Women over 40 are so stressed. Their lives are so busy.
yeah,
Between many of them working, of course, many being mums, but also now we're approaching the time where maybe our parents need help.
yeah.
Life can be a lot. So stress management is actually a really big thing in my coaching because if it's, for whatever the reason they're coming to me, almost everybody has really high stress.
Yeah, and it used to be, sort of, let's say about maybe 30 years ago, 20, 30 years ago. Um, it's not that nobody had stress. They obviously did have stress. There was a lot that was unspoken of, especially, very British style. We just go,
Mm.
march on. But stress was kind of like for the highfalutin businessmen that had a lot on their plate, that sort of thing. So when someone sort of said, "Oh, I've got really high stress," it always came with a reason. It's because I have this job, or it's because I live in this lifestyle. Now it can be anything. You can literally have like the easiest job in the world, but your life is causing you stress, your circumstances, your
Yeah.
environment, the people around you, where you live, demographically, even, everything, including the weather. As I don't know what it's like where you are right now, but oh my God, it is so miserable here. It's horrible. That has a huge impact. All of that affects our stress now. So I don't think I know anybody that doesn't have stress of some sort that is actually having a massive impact on their life.
Yeah. And when we design lifestyle, that sounds so, we don't sit down and design it. We do it one habit at a time. What's the thing that bugs you the most right now? And then we start there. I don't, it's not the course. It doesn't have an agenda. So it starts with, what do you want to fix first? What do you want to change first? And you fit it into people's lives, and then you do the next thing, because once that's solved, there will be maybe something else. And since our bodies are much more connected than we think or work with in standard Western medicine, where we've siloed things a lot, the heart, the lungs, the brain, changing one thing can then already have an impact on other things. So I had somebody, she
Yeah.
came to me because she didn't sleep very well, and then wanted to start working on nutrition very quickly. And in a, for her, I think, unexpected way, then with other changes, her sleep improved.
Yeah.
We did work on her sleep, but then we made other changes. And she's like, I sleep so well now. But we've not actually done a lot. I'm like, well, you have done a lot of, like one small change at a time.
Yep.
And
Huge results at the
balance,
end.
Mhm. Sort of balance came back. And
Yeah.
balance can also mean better sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the beauty of this kind of work, isn't it? That usually the issue or the ailment or the physical problem or whatever it might be that is displaying in a person is we know better than to treat it as a physical thing. There's usually way, way, way more under the surface that's actually causing, as you said, like a lack of sleep or, constipation or a pain in the knee or I can't move my hip or whatever it is. There's usually so much more around it. But these small steps make the most enormous impact. And I think that's one of my favorite things about this is I love that Western medicine can run alongside what we do in an alternative sense. It can run side by side, but I feel that we're very much needed. We're very much needed to look at things very differently, to see people differently, especially when they are in pain and they are struggling and they are suffering.
Yeah, I know, for me, I wouldn't be sitting here without Western medicine. So my story of how I became a health coach is because I got severe chronic fatigue syndrome and long COVID. And before that, I was hospitalized with COVID. So without that hospital, I would outright not be here. But then for the long COVID side of things, they didn't have answers. And there, people always struggle to almost accept, or understand, truly believe that we can fix something that medicine doesn't know how to fix, because it's multi-system. It goes across these silos so much, that we can impact on it with the pillars that I talked about. And at that point, I had never heard of functional medicine. But I had started finding pieces of research that I then built into my own theory, how I would get better after I had been told that I would never be better and had something like 50 different symptoms and no quality of life, 24/7 pain, wasn't able to work, a lot. And my sort of only option was to take those pieces that I had found and give it a go. There was no other option available. And I'm sitting here perfectly healthy, healthier than I was before, having a really good life, pain-free, all the symptoms are gone. The two go hand in hand. If I break a leg, I don't want to fix it as a health coach. I'd really like a doctor to look at it. There's many things that we can do. And because we then do it all the time in our lives, it has a massive impact on our physical and mental health and well-being.
Absolutely. And I mean, your story is incredible. And it's also quite shocking to just be sort of almost just left with, this is what you've got now, off you trot. And I mean, you were so young that you can go, you can't just say that to someone where, there's like 50 years ahead. That's a very long time to feel, what did you say, 50 odd symptoms? Like that's, that's ridiculous. That's absolutely crazy. So I mean, your story is okay, quite extreme in that sense, but by far not the only story I hear of complete system failure. And you're right. We know that we want to work alongside, we want to work with the NHS and everything else. And we are very grateful for everything they provide. As you said, you had COVID, and with their help, you came out the other side of that part, but were failed on the other side. And I've had so many people have similar stories on here, and some are worse and some are less. And, it's like, wow, it paints a picture of a very, very much struggling system, obviously, as we all know it is. Um, and that sometimes it is easier to put a lot down to almost like it's in your head. You're just imagining it. And you do need these alternative therapies, as many as you fancy, as many work for you, as many as you feel super comfy with, to kind of prevent the requirement, so that when we do use the system, it is for the broken legs and the surgeries and the big stuff, that we need someone that's, got that training and got that knowledge. But things like stress, which is obviously having the most enormous impact on people in all ways, from mental and physical, if we can bring that sort of thing back into a slight balance in a person, that would take the most immense pressure off of a very broken system, and very, very, very broken people as well.
And give people actual health and well-being back rather than
Well,
patches, band-aids, plasters. I remember thinking when I was very ill, I was hoping that that since so many got ill, that research would be accelerated. And I was expecting, there would be something, maybe a medication that I have to take all the time, or maybe an infusion that I have to go to once a month, or I had all these ideas, but it had to be a big thing. You can't fix something that big. And at that point, I was still supposed to work for 20 more years, and of course, live even longer. But even, work, I was like, how do you think my retirement is going to look like if I have to stop working 20 years early? And you have all those questions around your physical health, but also your financial health, just your whole life. And I didn't expect lifestyle to be as powerful as it is. So I fully understand everybody who comes maybe for like a discovery call, and I can see the doubts in their face, and I'm like, I don't blame you. I was in the same place. I I've always had a relatively healthy lifestyle. I've always been physically active. I've been a swimmer my whole life. I've done triathlon for a while. I grew up with an Italian mum on Mediterranean food, fresh food, relatively healthy food. And yet I hadn't understood how powerful lifestyle is. It was utter despair that made me try it when I found those pieces of research, and basically just came up with this idea that I understand that's a luxury, not everybody can do that. We had the opportunity to take some time off, And I proposed to my husband that we go away with the motorhome, travel very slowly because I was so ill, we weren't sure I was physically able to do it. And we'd go to Italy and gradually, just very slowly move, actually island hop down sort of Elba, Corsica, Sardinia, Sicily. And, sleep when I need to sleep, move when I can move, don't move when my body says not today, eat Mediterranean fresh food that's so available in Italy and Greece. And very quickly I started seeing improvements. They didn't go away overnight. It took me longer than the trip to actually get healthy. It took me 9 months to sort of get healthy for normal life. And then probably another 6 to 12 months to get back into the sport that I loved so much and missed so much. But a life that was acceptable, where I was like, okay, if it stops here, I can live with that.
Yeah.
I'm well enough again to maybe have dinner with a friend. Before I wasn't even able to have a friend come over to my house for a cup of tea. I was not well enough. I would have paid for that very severely. So to go from that to a first stage of this I can maybe live with. I don't want to, but I could. I can begin to accept, but to then actually just gradually get my full health back and feel my body do that work. And I read a book about a year ago where the doctor who wrote it talks about, for example, nutrition as construction material. And I quite like that picture.
Yeah.
She's like, the cells in our body are in the darkness. They don't look. They grab what's coming and they build the best health they can build, the best life they can build. And I like that image, that they're like, they'll survive that one McDonald's that you mentioned, but they would like the broccoli and, other things. And there's different ways of making everything. So we can send those good construction materials. And my understanding of, how much impact lifestyle has only came with this recovery. Before that, I
Yeah.
thought, yeah, it's good to have a healthy lifestyle, it's important. And then I realized that what medicine couldn't fix, lifestyle gradually fixed.
Wow. And how long were you in the camper van for? Was it 6 months?
Yeah, the trip was 6 months. We went down Italy, over to Greece, where my husband used to live. So we went to see some of his friends, back to Italy, up the boot, all the way to the Dolomites, sort of not very long in Austria, and then sort of across to the UK, up to Scotland. All very slowly. It sounds very fast now, but we did everything very slowly across France, up England, all the way to the Outer Hebrides, and then back to England to restart life. And by then, in relatively okay health, not perfect, but pretty okay. And so far, none of my so I have two niches that are two, places where I work. One is the one that I described with women over 40. That's the one I chose. And then the other one kind of chose me. I had actively not wanted to coach long COVID. It felt too close to home. And then people started showing up. And I was like, what do I do? What do I say? I can't send them away. I know that they've already seen 6, 7, 8 doctors. They've been told they can never get better like I had. And I know differently. So I didn't say no. And actually it's very rewarding to work with them. None of them are going on a motorhome trip, but you can work with the same elements from home and work towards recovery. The timeline is decided by their body and by
Yeah.
to what extent they can do the things that they should be doing. Do they have the help? If they have, very severe fatigue, is somebody else around who can do the cooking? If they know what to look out for, or do we first need to rebuild more energy so they get themselves back in a place where they can make the meals that would be helpful for their recovery? So we just work with what we have. But it's very, very rewarding to do it. And I do feel like it chose me rather than the other way around.
Definitely. And I would say they are just magnetized to you. As you said, you must seem like a bit of a beam in the dark. You're the light at the end of the tunnel. They've been told you're fine, you're not fine, but we can't do anything. We're not going to help. There's nothing we can do for you. And then there's you. Not just you, I've got this possible solution that works for you. It's you with, this is my story. And, I'm doing really well now. And I think that changes things. If you experienced it, they must just be absolutely drawn to you. And how does it feel working with that? I mean, initially didn't want to, but how does it
Mm.
feel working with it?
I think my concern was that I would get pulled into the emotions that I had for a very long
Yeah,
time. It's not my favorite time in my life to think back to those 2.5, 3 years. It did feel at the time like somebody just stole my life.
yeah,
And they certainly feel like that. And instead, it's more a case of they come out to me emotionally. They see me, they ask questions. I share more than I normally would in coaching. They want to know how recovery worked for me.
yeah,
Where they're at a particular point, and they might ask, "Did you ever have this point? Have you been here?" And a lot of the time I have. Occasionally they have a symptom of the very long list of symptoms that you can have with ME/CFS and long COVID that I skipped. I had many, but I didn't have all of them. We all have slightly different shades of it. But a lot of the time I have been there, and they work very hard. They're very focused. They want their life back, like I did. That was my goal. I need my life back. The answer, this is it for the rest of your life, was not thinkable for me. And
yeah.
it's the same for them. So they they basically dedicate their lives right here, right now, to the future life that they want back, and do everything they can, to do the things that we now understand help towards recovery. And I think it's good for everyone. For me, it's good to not dive back into those emotions, and for them, it gives them a break from the emotions and hope. And hope is massive in recovery.
Definitely. Definitely. And taking that control back as well, so they speak with someone like you and they've gone from being told it's out of your control, it's out of my control, we can't do anything. And there's just like a full stop at the end of that sentence that screams so loud. Whereas by you sort of saying to them, well, actually, if we dive into this area and if we make a change in this area and if you look at this bit and then we look at all of this stuff, and this is what we're going to kind of do going forward, and it's going to change every time you need to change something, but let's just go at your body's pace. You've taken that screaming full stop off the end and you've almost put the ball back in their court, giving them the control. This is your life. What's your goal? How are you aiming for it? Let's see what you need and what your body needs. It's all very you, isn't it? It's back in your
Mm.
control, your game. You've got this. And I think that's probably got to feel very empowering after being told kind of like, no, you know, just like this full stop of a no. It must feel very awakening.
Yeah, I think it is. And, I think some people find the empowerment overwhelming. then we try to break it down and make
Yeah.
smaller steps. But at the end of the day, it has to be the better solution that you can actually change something than accepting your fate. That is not a life that you want.
Yeah.
We work, and I said earlier when I talked about my work with women over 40, that we start wherever they want to start. If somebody says, I've had the same New Year's resolutions for the last 5 years about movement. I want to start there. It's never worked. I want to prove to myself that it is working. We start there, and with long COVID, we don't start with movement, not with exercise. We generally start with making things smaller, go easier, do less. But it does still have the element of what is the most important to you right now and what's also feasible. They can want to change their nutrition, but if they have severe fatigue and there's no help, then it's not going to be the first thing. But we sort of work through that, and work with, okay, what's the next goal you want to work towards? I had somebody who had like a little forest about a 15-minute walk from her house, but she started off in a wheelchair, so there was no going to that forest. So that was one of her goals as she gradually, was able to walk again, be independent around her home. And then very gradually, but her goal was always, I want to go to the forest, in the summer and be able to just lie down under a tree and enjoy the bird song and, the way the light looks in sunshine in a forest. And she had all these, it was very, as you can tell, it was very specific, very
And very
visual,
beautiful. Yeah, very
very
beautiful.
beautiful.
Yeah,
And
what a goal.
imagining that, is good, because even as I just said that, I could feel that my body went like,
Yeah,
this is nice. And, it wasn't even
yeah.
my vision. It was somebody
It
else's
is, and
vision.
as you were saying, it is very soothing just listening to you
Yeah.
speak about it, because you can imagine yourself lying down and you're like, oh, and it's I think it's our bodies need to connect to nature, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a fabulous goal for her to have. Did she make it?
Yes, she did.
Wow.
Yeah. It's
Wow.
amazing.
Oh, she must have just been so happy.
It's
Like,
beautiful.
wow.
When it gradually happens. And then, of course, then we're like, okay, what's the next goal? We're not stopping at the forest. That's not your full life back. That's a piece, and it's a good piece, an important piece.
Yeah.
But what next? And then, we make the next choice and work towards that. And in a way, that's the same, whether it's women over 40 struggling with menopause or, you know, having been diagnosed with pre-diabetes and, having read somewhere that if you change your nutrition and movement and many other things in a way that suits you, that you can, sort of reverse your way out of there. The way of working is always the same. What's sort of top of mind for you right now, and how could we do that? It's just like a brainstorming about how could we
Yeah.
make it into your life?
Yeah. I like that brainstorm. It is. I can almost imagine that's the conversation between you and a client. I mean, I think we live in a world where everything's a quick fix, right? Like we want everything now. So when we want to lose weight, we want to lose weight now.
Yeah,
And when we want to drop a dress size, we want it now. Because, tomorrow I want to wear that dress that's the wrong size for me and I need to lose that weight today. And it's kind of like, no. Likewise with jobs, we're very, I want to expand. I want to get bigger. I want a promotion. I want bigger house, bigger car, whatever it is. And the world has kind of taught us that and then accommodated it to make it look like it's all possible all the time. This is very, very fast. You can have it all. You can have it now. All you got to do is push this button, stop your soul away, and you can have it immediately. It's all
yeah,
yours. I am all for gradual improvement. I think that anything that's worth improving on and making better, but also the one that's going to stick is going to stay because you've been at it for so long. It is just part of your life by this point. that you're not looking for a quick fix. You're not trying to ram something into your day or into your diet or into your lifestyle. That, give it a month, you're going to struggle to keep up with it. And this is where, New Year's resolutions start failing, isn't it? Just trying to shove something in immediately and expecting it to stick doesn't work. I am all for, if someone says, okay, well, you've got this plan, but it's going to take you a year, 2 years. I don't mind that gradual movement, especially when you can see, like your lady with the forest, you start to see that you've reached goal 1. I don't mind if goal 10 is a little bit down the line, but I've started here, I got here. And I think that that one is very important in a world that's telling us more, quick, quick, quick. We need to go the opposite way and just slow, take less, do less, not be less in a bad way, but, just be more chill, more in tune, in touch. And that alone has just the most incredible effects.
Yeah, a friend of mine uses do less, be more.
That's nice. I like
And
them.
I think he's hitting the nail there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I do. It's I think we've got quite a difficult world at the moment. I don't know what the future one looks like, but I do feel that we do sit in a very complex place where we're all having to try and fight mentally through the battlefield, aren't we? What's been created for us, telling us it's what we want. And I think a lot of our bodies are now telling us, actually, that's not what I want. I can't speak for everybody, of course, but like you're disappearing off into, the Mediterranean. That sort of thing speaks to me, just that connection to nature, being back almost like where we started from kind of thing, I mean, as you know, I lived in Cyprus, and the Mediterranean does speak anyway, as do their food and everything else. But, that connection back into nature, it can be incredibly resetting for us when the world is telling us to basically turn on more devices and stare in the opposite direction.
Yeah, and I think that was part that helped me, and as I said earlier, I understand that that's not possible for everyone, and that was a luxury I had in my recovery. But I remember my my boss where I was working at the time was very keen on keeping me and said, but you don't have to leave. You could just take sick leave. And I said, but then I'm gonna feel sick. I'm going to need sick notes and all sorts of processes happen. And the difference was by, hopping down those islands. And, in hindsight, I saw very little because I was just not able
Yeah.
to go on big hikes or, I spent a lot of time resting, but I was resting sitting on a beautiful beach in Sardinia. In
And resting with
spring,
purpose as well. Like you were intentionally allowing and giving your body permission to be at rest. There is a difference. I mean, I think most people can say this when they sit down to rest at night. You don't notice until much later in the evening that you're not resting at all. Your body's not relaxing. There is a difference between what you did and just choosing rest. Like you proper put intention to it. You gave yourself that permission, that time, that space, as did your husband, as did your motorhome. And yes, in beautiful places. And maybe we're not all as lucky to go to such beautiful places, but that permission. I had a lady on the podcast last week, and she was talking very much about this, that permission that we find so hard to give to ourselves, to not do something, to stop, to rest, to relax, and I think that was probably where you went absolutely spot on correct, is you just gave yourself that space.
yes, you just reminded me in my late 20s when I had my first role as a manager, I got sent to this coaching as a manager training. And part of that was that we got, after the training, we got one coaching session. And I remember that lady asked me what I do when I don't do anything. And I can still, and I mean, the question in itself technically has the answer in it. I remember sitting there and looking at her, thinking, really like, what do I do? Until I just remember, like in a film when they speak sort of in slow motion,
Yeah.
I remember just saying, and that's after a lot of thinking, I said, I don't think I ever don't do anything.
Yeah.
And she looked at me and said, that's what I thought. I realized that and that was long before mobile phones in our pockets.
Yeah.
But I would wait for a train. I had to have a book in my bag so I could read. I never just, back then, I never just sat and watched people go by at the
Yeah.
railway station or just, look out into nowhere. And that was sort of the moment where I recognized that I never don't do anything. And I think mobile phones, constantly having access
Very
and
much.
being drawn into them have, of course, intensified and multiplied that.
I mean, again, I'm sure none of us would completely want it to disappear. We're very grateful for having this technology and so on, but it's very helpful. It's very useful. It connects people. I mean, look at us now. We wouldn't have been able to do this before. I wouldn't have even met you. But it's it's probably the worst thing that ever happened to all of us as humanity. The worst thing that ever happened was this amount of technology in our back pocket, because we just are constantly strapped to it, aren't we? Even when you don't want to be, even when you don't mean to be,
Mhm.
there it is in your hand. It's almost like you put it down and it disappears again. You're kind of like, hold on a second. I'm sure I'm just putting you down.
Yeah, and it is, it's a frequent topic in coaching. A lot of people would like to change their relationship to their smartphones.
Wow.
And my last employer before I retrained as a health coach and started my own practice was Google. So I clearly have a technology affinity. I would not want to live without Google Maps, and I wouldn't even want to live without my smartphone. But like my health, I would like to be in control how and when I use it. And they're not making it easy. So it's
Yeah.
again, it's talking about what would you like? If somebody says, like you just said, my mobile just seems to magically end up in my hand and I don't know how it got there. I'm sure I put it down 5 times already to look at, okay, so, what are those situations? What would you like the situations to be and how do you get there? And then try things out. I think that's big. And that, for me, that comes from technology. I'm sure we're not the only ones who used it. But in technology, we use this agile methodology to develop things. And that means we try something out and then test it very quickly. So if it's wrong, we know early and we
Yeah.
haven't done the whole piece until we're like, oh, step 2 was wrong, which means that step 3 to 700 were also wrong. And I like the approach in coaching as well. It gives people permission to, in inverted commas, fail and not see it as failure, that it isn't failure. It's we agree something what you're going to try, let's say with your mobile phone. And then next time I see you, we'll see how it went. And then we'll learn, we'll take that as data, as information and say, okay, which bit worked, which bit didn't work? What are we going to try next? And it becomes lighter. It's not so heavy. It's not, the restrictions that you said earlier. It's
Yeah.
more like, no, let's figure this out. We can do this one step at a time. We can do this. We've had things where people came back with the same thing 4 times.
Yeah.
And they were like, I didn't do it again. I'm like, all right. Why do you think you didn't? What happened? Help me with the information so we can in Agile, it's called iterate. So we can iterate on the solution we had and find the next one that we think could work. And it doesn't matter if it takes 1 or 7 steps. Once you have it, it's this second nature thing because we've made it fit.
Yeah.
And let
And
it
you've
go.
gone through all the ways that don't. So really, there's only one solution left. And it's perfect. What was it you said earlier that I said I loved about you built it yourself, you built it into your own lifestyle yourself. You put it there. And I think that must have such an impact on people's mindset to be in that position. Because as you were talking, I'm just thinking of all the ways, and it's all over social media as well as we're not just talking NHS here or doctors or anything like that, but it's always sort of like just these commands, isn't it? Eat better, drink less, eat less, move more. You just kind of go, okay, well, how do I do that? Like, can you guide me? No. Okay. I don't think I get it then. But if you go through this way and with all these not failures, but these missteps along the way, we are still just children. We learn like this very much. I was talking with my daughter this morning about something. She said, well, what if if I mess it up? And I said to her, what if you do? You'll learn not to, how to do it differently next time. You'll learn not to do that exact same thing again. We were actually talking about roller skating. So, it's like next time you'll know not to fall. You'll know that the ground will bump, It's simple stuff, but we do learn. I said to her, sometimes the falls are the things that they drive us forward. Because if we don't fall, and you just live in fear permanently of that anyway, and you'll always assume what it would be like. But without it, it doesn't mean it's perfect without. You need those falls and those bumps to move forward. And I would actually put, my very crass mid-driving parental 8 a.m. advice to anything that goes, we need all of that. We do. And I love that you use it as like a form of data, because I mean that's exactly what it is, isn't it? It's a way to auto correct it as well. We're going to swerve this way now. It's brilliant.
It's how we learn, and
Yeah,
we tend to be generous with other people, particularly children, but also just others, and not so generous with ourselves.
no.
But we're allowed to try, we're allowed to try something out. And I've been a vegetarian for like 30 years since university. And when I started my health coaching training, we were coaching each other a lot. And we had to bring real life situations. And I thought, oh, this is a good opportunity for the vegetarian who doesn't like vegetables to start eating vegetables. So you have a vegetarian and now a future health coach who does not like vegetables. How's that going to work? And it was, like this, it was online, and you have this group of like 15 people, our facilitator and the whole group, and this one person ready to coach me. And I said, so I'm a vegetarian. He nodded and he's, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. And I said, I don't like vegetables. And it felt like 15 people at the same time. I was like, and I'm like, easy people, everybody take a deep breath. First of all, that's not nothing. I did grow up on Mediterranean diet. We made our fresh tomato sauce at home, and, all those things. We made a lot of things fresh. But it was about, how do I figure this out? That was my coach's challenge. And ever since, I actually eat vegetables.
Wow.
We've actually figured it out, and that was a one loop thing. Sometimes it's more loops. It doesn't matter.
And that was
But
just when you were training.
that was when I was training.
Wow.
Not, that's a few years ago, but not, I wasn't 18 at that point.
Yeah.
And, but it worked, and we figured out that the question is, do you actually not like any vegetables? Like, no, I'm fine. I'm fine with like green beans, and I'm fine with a few things. And, gradually it led to the solution that I'm going to try one new vegetable per week. And we had, I have to think about it now. We had 3 rules. Well, 3 sort of avenues it could go. If I love it, it obviously goes in the frequent repertoire. If it's all right, I'll eat it and we don't have to do it again. And if I hate it, I was allowed to throw it away.
Fair enough.
I absolutely do. The whole, life is supposed to be fun and tasty and joyful. And I don't believe in getting the vegetables down, which is why I didn't have them before. I didn't enjoy them, but I found new recipes, new ways of making the vegetables that I thought I didn't like. I still don't like them in the way they were made before. I still rather not have them if a restaurant, for example, serves them the way
Fair
I thought,
enough.
that have made me not like vegetables. But clearly there are enough vegetables and enough ways to make them that I do enjoy vegetables now. But that was one of those moments where like, okay, let's try this out. Let's see where that leads. Maybe just makes the range of vegetables that I eat bigger. And it has fundamentally changed my relationship to vegetables. So I think this iterating, sometimes you're lucky, like on that occasion. And I had an amazing trainee coach. Sometimes you find the solution right away, and sometimes you might come back next week and go like, oh, that did not work. I tried that for 4 weeks and all 4 of them went in the bin, then it's clearly not a good approach. And I do have to say, I didn't throw any away. I
Oh,
actually,
well done.
we ate them all. I didn't love them all, but they were all right the way with the recipes that I then found. There's so much choice online now. You
There
can make
is.
everything in about 1,000 different ways, with time constraints, working full time. And, we talked about stress earlier. People don't have time to make 5-hour dinners, so they had to be relatively simple, easy to make, and ideally tasty so I can make them again. And that's
Yeah.
what I work with other people, and I tell, my coachees about it when a situation comes up. They're allowed to know that health coaches are imperfect and we have to figure things out. And we might have moments where we're like, oh, I'm not sure this week I've moved enough. But then we're like, but I know how it works. I know what works for me. I'm just going to get back on that, on the plan that I've designed for my own life.
Yeah. And who would want a perfect coach anyway, in any respect? You don't want anyone that's perfect because all they're going to do is tell you that you're doing it wrong. You want somebody human that's gone through these things themselves, even if it doesn't look the same as your clients' things, but you've got your own stuff. You've got your own human experience going on. And I think that adds a really beautiful element to it where you're ready there should they fall, then it's okay. Let's get you back up and get you back
Yeah.
on again.
And the women, I can't speak to men. I mostly coach women, not exclusively, but my sort of experience set is probably about 99% women. Guilt is a big thing in my experience for women. Whether it's that McDonald's or it's, not liking running, and thinking they have to run, but they're really not enjoying it. They've tried every year for the last 20 years and they've never enjoyed it. Guilt is so big. And as much as, I really love that, I love happy people, not people who punish themselves with guilt.
Yeah.
So we work our way out of there and we're like, okay, if you are going to have, that treat that is not ideal, at least enjoy it, and then go back to nutrition, movement, whichever example it is, whichever piece of your lifestyle. Go back to the one that you design and, design it in an 80-20 kind of way that most of the time you're doing the right things, like moving
Yeah.
enough, most of the time. But then we design it into it. There's going to be Christmas. There's going to be your birthday. There's going to be a family tradition that happens, I don't know, at Easter. There's always going to be something and they need a place too. They're not going to disappear just because you're deciding you want to be healthier.
Yeah, completely.
How do you
Completely.
design that into your life? And I see it a
Yeah.
lot at the moment. I don't know if it's because I follow so many people working in health, on social, or if it's actually just everywhere. I hear a lot about being the CEO of your health.
Okay,
Recently,
yeah, good way of thinking about it, yeah.
keeps popping up in on my socials, in my inbox. It feels like it just comes at me from all the sides. I
Yeah,
like the, being the CEO, this empowerment, this I I decide, and I decide when I'm giving myself an evening off, knowing that tomorrow I'll get back on it. And I was listening to a
absolutely.
podcast recently about habits. You've probably heard of the book Atomic Habits.
Yeah,
So it was with the author of Atomic Habits, James Clear. And he was saying that when he started to write, it was for himself. It wasn't even for a book. The book is now a few years old and has sold something like 25 million copies in I don't know how many languages. And he was saying that when he started to write, he would write an article kind of for himself and then started to publish online on Mondays and Thursdays. And that he made a point that if he missed the Monday, to definitely not miss the Thursday. It's like there were times when I didn't write the article both days in the week, but I made sure that I wouldn't skip the whole week.
yeah, wouldn't skip a
And then
whole
suddenly you
one.
fall out of that habit and you have to go and, find that lifestyle that you designed for yourself again. So it's a little bit easier when we catch it with just moments.
Yeah,
But even if he missed 4 weeks, he knew how it worked. He could get back into it. If after 4 weeks he goes like, oh, that Monday turned into 4 weeks of not writing. Well, how about we just restart? Guilt free.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's like a really important one because again, I'm going to speak for women here, again, mostly my demographic as well, but purely because I think being a woman, I just pick up more on that side of things. And we're very good at, oh, I cocked it up this week. So I start again, on the first of the next month. And someone said to me a little while back, no, you start tomorrow. And I've heard this now about all sorts from getting back on when I say diet, I don't mean like a restrictive one. I just mean what I eat, what I consume. Getting back onto my plan of what I eat, my nutrition plan, or whether it was my exercise regime, or whether it was my meditation, or whatever it was, whatever practice, my yoga that I put into place that makes me happy. And they're like, no, you don't need to wait now just because you messed up today. Don't worry, let today go, let it go, it's fine. Back tomorrow. Get it back tomorrow immediately so that you can just get your habit back, especially when you do enjoy something that doesn't feel like it's something you shouldn't be doing. It feels good to get back on that. Like you said, empowering. You're kind of like, oh, okay, I've put myself back in charge here and I'm taking control of this situation. And it's a nice one. But you see, I think mindset is probably the biggest factor for all of these things. And I think that from what I can gather from what you're saying, people like you must be so very instrumental in that section where we all know kind of what we're aiming for. We just don't know how to get there, and sometimes you need someone. And this is what I've learned myself over the last 2 to 3 years is we no longer really live in a society where we can do everything ourselves. I mean, I'm sure we all had grandmothers that used to sew the socks and, make everything from scratch, and pastry was made from nothing and, all this sort of thing. We're not really those people anymore. We're not really that society anymore either. So, it's okay working out at home. That works for a lot of people and they find it great. I had a conversation with someone recently and I said to her, it's funny, it's the opposite for me. You see, she felt that the gym put her off exercising, being around people and people that were better at it than her and things like that. It really put her off. Whereas working at home was flexible and it fit around her schedule. For me, I find that working out at home gives me no drive whatsoever. I've got no push, no inspiration, nothing but getting into my car and having to drive to somewhere that I've paid for. It inspires me beautifully into 3 sessions a week, that works for me. And I think that we can't do it all. We do need sometimes someone to be that voice of reason that you sound like you are, where you've got someone to go back to, a little bit of accountability to come and have a conversation with you about where I'm up to, what happened this week, what's going to happen next week. So I absolutely applaud people like yourself, because I think you are very much needed in a very much chaotic world. We need you, Tanja.
Thank you. I think it's just a very practical approach. It's if you need to go out, for strength training or whatever it might be, then that needs to be designed into that lifestyle, because otherwise it's not going to work. And it's, I happened to run. I got to know them really well. I had a couple of delayed flights, and a quick flight back from Scotland to England turned into a 30-hour trip.
Oh,
And I
God.
met this couple, and he's traveling a lot, and he would like to move more. And we had a lot of time on the train from, Inverness all the way down to London. Um, and I wasn't obviously not coaching, but we were just chatting and talking. And I said, well, so what do you enjoy? What did you do before you traveled? And what would you like to do? And then started offering ideas. How does that feel? And there was this one thing where he instantly zoomed in and went like, that I could do. You could just see that he could so fast. He could see how that would work in his current lifestyle, and he doesn't always travel, like Tuesday and Wednesday. It's like one week it's Monday till Thursday, and the other week it's just a Monday. And then so it's difficult to establish a
Yeah,
routine, like going to a gym to particular classes. And that has stopped him from doing things. And, he can't bring a whole suitcase full of heavy weights either on the trips.
absolutely.
So it was, it was like this typical conversation, even though I wasn't, actively coaching. I just said, well, asked questions, trying to understand his circumstances, his preferences. And literally it was just this one suggestion where he just went like that. And I can almost guarantee that he has ordered it online since. I haven't checked, but I would be surprised if he hadn't.
That's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Well, thank you so much for being on today. It's been
Thank
absolutely
you, Anna.
fascinating to listen to you. And as always, I will put all of Tanja's details so that if you would like to reach out or to work with her directly, you'll find all the details and the links in the bio of the episode as well. It's just been wonderful to have you on. Honestly, I could listen to you for ages. Actually, this is like our third phone call, isn't it? So we've talked quite a bit, and I could honestly just sit and chat with you for absolutely ages. But thank you so much for coming on. It really has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. And I can obviously talk about, health and how we can change our lifestyles to what we individually want them to be. I can talk about that forever. So, any time.
We'll have to have a catch up once you've got yourself up to Scotland and see what's new with you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here, and to you all out there as well. Until next time, take care.